I'm Meg. I'm one of the trainers on staff over at the Humane Society of Western Montana. Thanks for joining us. With me here is my dog Volta. She's laying at my feet like a good girl right now. But I wanted to talk today about something a little less serious, though all of the other topics we cover in both our Puppy Spotlight and Behavior Spotlight are very important. Sometimes it's important just to have fun with your dog. So I wanted to guide you guys through some tricks with your pup today. There are some pragmatic uses, but also it's really important to mentally stimulate your dog, and it gives your dog something to do indoors with you as well. Great. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was some basic terminology. I'm sure that you have joined us for previous spotlights before, but if you haven't, I think it's important to cover just some basic terms first. So the first thing I want to talk about is something called a marker word. And a marker is a signal that you give your dog to let them know the behavior they're performing is what you're looking for and a reward is coming. So it's just a communication tool for you and your dog. For me, I like to use a marker as a verbal, like the word good or yes. If you've done clicker training before, a clicker makes a great marker because it's distinct, but we're not going to be using clickers today just for the sake of ease. But just to illustrate what a marker is, I'm going to say the word good or yes when my dog performs the behavior I'm looking for, and then deliver a food reward. Now, the important part is that a reward always follows your marker, just to help create consistency. So here is my pup, Volta. She is a 3-year-old now, yellow lab that still acts like a puppy. I love that she's sitting right now. Maybe I'm going to ask her for a down. Yes. And the exact moment she performs that behavior, I'm going to use my marker word, which is yes, and then deliver a treat. Maybe I'm going to ask for a sit. Yes, and then feed a treat. So if you have any questions about this, I should have iterated this at the beginning. If you have any questions about all of this, feel free to drop them in the chat during this presentation. I'm happy to answer those. And if there aren't any questions that questions that I missed during this presentation, of course, you can email us and we'll provide those resources at the end, or call our free behavior helpline, which is a service we offer to the community about all sorts of behavioral concerns or questions that you might have. We have 3 lovely certified professional dog trainers on staff available. So now that I've talked about a marker and a reward, I want to talk about something called a lure. And again, if you've seen any of these behavior streams before, you've probably seen a lure. A lure is what it sounds like. It's kind of a bribe to help manipulate your dog's body to a way that you want. So it's something your dog likes that they're willing to follow or to use to manipulate their body. So for my dog, I'm going to use food to manipulate her body, maybe into a sit or into a down. Ooh, dropped a treat. A sit or a spin or any of these things. And we're going to use lures today to help teach your dog just a couple of these tricks. Again, if you have any questions about what a lure is, feel free to drop it in the chat. I know this is kind of an unorthodox way of teaching tricks, so don't hesitate if you have questions. I want to talk about a really cute trick, which is teaching your dog to sit pretty or to beg. It can help strengthen your dog's core, which not very many exercises target. And also it's just really, really adorable to ask your dog to sit nicely for a treat. And we're going to use a lure, a marker, and a rewards in this case. So for my dog, who already kind of knows this trick, a sit pretty or a beg could just be, and for her, she knows the hand motion, but not a verbal. Sitting upright, yes, and then feeding a treat. Now, if your dog is really new to this, they're not going to be able to hold that position for very long. Kind of like if you've never done a crunch before, you're not going to do 50 crunches in a row. So don't expect your dog to be able to hold this position right away. And we're going to do it really incrementally to make it nice and easy on your pup. So I have my food lure handy. And I'm going to bring my dog in front of me. It helps to have your dog in a sit first. So if your dog knows the verbal cue sit, you can ask for a sit. If they don't know sit, that's okay. You can use a food lure to get them into that sit reliably. So if your dog is standing, you're going to hold that treat directly in front of their nose and raise it up over their head. Yes. And when their butt hits the ground, your dog is now in a sitting position, and you can begin to teach them to sit pretty. So again, I'm going to have a food lure. With most of our lures, again, we're holding them directly in front of our dog's noses so they don't get distracted. Sometimes if I hold it back here, she doesn't really know what I'm going to do or how I'm going to try and position her. So right in front of her nose, and I'm going to very gently bring it, yes, right up over her head. Now, she already knows this trick, so she's already lifting both paws off the ground. But if you see your dog even begin to go upright or begin to lift their paws, use your marker like good or yes and feed that treat. So I'm just going to practice with my dog a few repetitions. If you have your dog at home, if they haven't had their dinner yet, feel free to grab some of their kibble, make use of their daily ration, and start practicing this core exercise with them. So my dog, again, she's in a sitting position. I'm going to hold the food lure directly in front of my dog's nose and gently draw my hand upward. Yes. So she did a tiny pop there with her 2 front feet, so I'm marking the exact moment she does that because that's what I'm looking for. If I'm too late to mark or say the word good or yes, and her feet are already on the ground, she might think that she's being rewarded for a sit. Now, if your dog stands up, that's okay. You don't have to tell them no or or anything like that. We don't want them to get discouraged with this exercise. You can just simply lure them back into a sit or ask them to sit again. And when they perform the behavior, yes, mark with good or yes and feed that treat. So again, if you have any questions about this, feel free to let me know. And again, I'm just going to be practicing with my pup. Yes. So there's a little pop, not super big. Yes. And every dog has a different carriage, right? Not every dog is predisposed to picking their paws all the way up, especially if they're new. I've seen some dogs hold their legs out to the side like a penguin, so it might be really cute to call this trick penguin if your dog stands up that way. Great way to make use of it. Yes. My dog does not like holding her feet really high, but that's all right. And if she sits back a little too far, I'm just going to reposition her with the lure. Yes. Mark and then feed that treat. Now, over time, as your dog is becoming really good at following this lure and picking their paws off the ground where you want them to be, you can hold it for just a few seconds longer. Yes, before you feed them that treat. And that helps them, again, just gain that core strength. And if your dog is new to this, right, they're not going to be able to hold it because those ab muscles aren't often worked. Yes. Now let's say my dog is doing really well at sitting upright for a longer period of time. Now I can start to remove that treat from the equation and feed it to her only afterwards. So I don't have a treat in my hand this time. She's already anticipating. But I'm going to do that same hand motion without the treat, so my hand is empty. When she moves into that position, yes, and then I'm going to feed her a treat. Now I have the convenience of a treat pouch, but you can always hold the kibble behind your back or treats behind your back in your fist, or just put them in your pocket. Yes. Yes. Right, and over time, as my dog becomes even better, now maybe I can just do the hand motion. Yes. Now you're probably wondering, or a common question is, okay, well, when do I tell my dog to sit pretty? Or how was she going to know to sit pretty when I ask her to? And I recommend not adding a verbal cue until your dog is reliably following that hand motion, so they kind of get a sense of what they're actually being asked to do. So if I wanted to add a verbal cue, and this is a great way to illustrate because Volta here does not have a verbal cue for sit pretty, I'm going to say the word like beg or sit pretty, and then give her a few seconds to think about it, then remind her with that hand motion. So I'm going to call it sit pretty. Sit pretty. And she's kind of confused. She's backing up. That's okay. I'm going to put her back into a sit. Yes. Sit pretty. I think she thinks I'm asking her to spin. Yes. And notice how I didn't say or no for a spin. Spins are cool and all. I'm just going to remind her again with that hand signal. Sit pretty. Yes. See if I can do one more. Sit pretty. She wanted to spin again. Yes. Kind of a weak one, but that's all right. You get the idea. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. But this is a great way to make headway on teaching this trick to your pup. Awesome. So another trick that I wanted to talk to you guys about today is peekaboo or boo. And this is one of my favorite tricks because it's just very, very cute. And it's great for crowded spaces if you need to get your dog out of the way, like if you're walking through Home Depot and there's suddenly a lot of people, you can easily get your dog out of the way by having them stand cutely between your legs. It can also be helpful for people like people who maybe have mobility issues and want to teach their dog to help steady them. Some people teach this as a service cue. It has a multitude of purposes. All right. So peekaboo for my dog, she knows it as boo. So I'm just going to ask her for it. Okay, touch. Boo. Yes. Great. So her putting her nose between my legs. She only kind of pokes her head out a little bit. Boo. Yes. Awesome. So if your dog is maybe a little bit more leery of tight spaces or a little bit more fearful, it can be helpful to keep your legs farther apart at first. And it's a little bit weird and cumbersome to lure your dog through your legs, but again, we're using a lure for this exercise as well. So I have a treat in my hand. Again, we're holding those lures directly in front of our dog's noses to guide them. Because if I hold it back here, I mean, she's a luring pro, but your dog might not necessarily know what you want them to do. So you're going to hold it directly in front of their nose and draw it really slowly at first. You may have to reward your dog incrementally, so even begin to move through your legs at first so that you can then fully reward the finished behavior. So I'm going to start with my dog. It can be helpful to have them in a sit so they're kind of in a static position. A lot of dogs really are used to training directly in front of their person. Notice when you ask your dog to sit or lay down, they're usually right here. Not many people train their dog to sit or a down next to them unless your dog is really good at heeling. So I'm going to have her in a sit first. Again, I have my food lure. I'm going to put my legs kind of wide, and then I'm going to reach my hand through, yes, and mark and reward my dog for even beginning to strain her nose in that direction. So I'll do it from the side. Sit. So notice how I have the food back here. I'm going to reward her even for beginning to crane her nose through. Yes. 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 And again, if your dog isn't familiar with luring or isn't used to being trained with them behind you, it can take a little bit of time at first. So be patient, reward them very frequently for even attempting to work this way with you. And over time, I'm going to reward her for moving farther and farther between my legs. And again, if you have your dog at home, and again, if they haven't been fed dinner, grab some of their kibble if you haven't already, and just do a few of these with your pup. And you may only be able to get to here today, and that's okay. Maybe you have to reward your pup for being behind you at first because they're not used to it. At least your dog is getting this really awesome mental stimulation, and baby steps towards a finished result are always important. Yes. Do it for the side. Yes. And again, as your dog becomes more proficient at this over time, you can draw them a step or two through and then feed that treat. Now, if your dog is doing this reliably, I encourage you to use something like the word okay or free to release them from that position because it's so cramped. A lot of dogs sometimes just want to run through, or maybe they'll go through and then pop back out again. So what that looks like for me and my dog is when she's fully going through my legs, yes, I'm going to reward her for being in that position, yes. And then I'm going to release her free. I step over her. Sometimes she likes, this behavior has been so rewarded for her, she would just prefer to stand there instead of moving away. And if your dog is like Volta, and they're kind of lazy, and they're in that position, you say free, and they don't go, you can just toss a treat out. Your dog will move away. Awesome. So we had a great question dropped in the chat. It says, how long did it take you to fade the lure for Sit Pretty? For me and my dog, I didn't work on this trick a whole lot. I actually haven't, like I said, put it on a verbal cue, and we actually just kind of reinvestigated it today. I think every dog is different, and every dog moves at their own speed. Certain behaviors, Volta has learned tricks within one session, and then other tricks that are harder for her physically take a really long time. For her to play dead, I would say it took me about a year because she hated being in that position when she was when she was training and working with me. So every dog is different. For me, I would say it took a couple of weeks to fade the lure, but I did really short sessions and didn't focus our training sessions just on this behavior. But if you do a few minutes a day, every day, even just for those incremental responses, you're going to find that your dog is learning this trick much more quickly. Great question. Awesome. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. I guess I should talk about when you add the verbal for peekaboo or for boo. Just like with Sit Pretty, you want to add it after your dog is already reliably performing the behavior. She's kind of showing off right now. She knows she's on camera. One of the previous sessions, she was trying to fish a treat out from under the couch for a while. So you want to add your verbal cue when your dog is performing the behavior reliably. So if my dog is going through my legs pretty frequently, I'm going to say the word boo or peekaboo and then lure her through. I'm going to give her a few seconds again to think about it because it's a new behavior for her and I don't want her to always rely upon me luring her through. So if I wanted to call it something else like peekaboo, yes. She says, I still hear boo, I'm still going to do it. So if I wanted to call it like tomato, right, which is a silly word, but dogs don't know English, they just know the sound being linked with the behavior. I'm going to say tomato. Yes. She's anticipating. She makes it look too easy. Tomato. Right, and she didn't do it because it's new for her. I'm going to orient my body so that it's easier for her to perform the behavior. Yes. And then feed a treat. And that's harder for your dogs too, right? To perform this cue when you're standing in front of them, or easier for them to perform it when you're standing in front of them versus when you're standing to the side and ask for it, because they have to do that much more to get into that position. Like if I say tomato. Yes. Good girl. Tomato. Yes. It's not always this easy. Trainers sometimes have to work really hard too. Awesome. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. I'm going to go on to our next behavior. And it's a little bit more simple since your dog has been working their brain, hopefully for a few minutes here. I want to talk about paw or shake. And maybe your dog already knows this, which is awesome if they do. It's a great husbandry behavior. It's a great way to check their paws for cheat grass or for nail trimmings, things like that. But I'm also going to talk about how you can make it harder as well and teach them maybe to high five, which is really, really cute and an awesome trick for kids to do with a dog. Because it's pretty hands-off, right? You don't need to be I'm 5'9", so if you have a really tall dog, like our behavior manager, Tiff, who I'm sure you have seen in our previous live streams if you've joined us before, her dog Brayburn is really, really tall, and she's a little more short-statured. So your dog size has to match your size a little bit for that skill. But for shake, anybody can do shake. So shake is just shake, right? Or paw, or whatever you want to call it. And again, we're going to use a food lure to start. Now this one, we're not going to hold directly in front of our dog's noses to manipulate their body. We kind of want them to already be in a seated position first. Then we're going to hold our food lure, if your dog is really mouthy, in a fist, so that if they gnaw at it or they lick it or nudge it, they're not hurting your very delicate or sensitive fingers. If your dog is less mouthy, it can be helpful to kind of skip a step and just hold the treat under your thumb in your hand. So this kind of looks like what you do when you ask for a paw or a shake. So for my dog, I'm going to hold this food lure. Like I said, it's helpful to have them in a sit first, so I'm going to lure her into a sit. And then I'm going to hold the food lure kind of below the end of her nose, directly in the middle of her chest. And I'm going to ignore any other behavior she performs. So if she's licking or mouthing or biting, I'm just going to ignore those. I'm not going to correct her. I'm just going to wait and see if she lifts her paw even a little bit. Yes, my dog knows this skill, so right in the middle, yes. And again, if your dog lifts their paw even a little bit, or even if they do the whole thing, use your marker, good or yes, and then feed that treat. Yes. She makes it look so easy because she's trained. Yes. It can be helpful for some dogs if they're kind of getting confused and they're nosing it. I have found dogs are more likely to use their feet. If you let their muzzle move your fist just a little bit, it kind of taps into that instinctual thing where dogs use their feet to stabilize a food project in order for them to put their paw up. So if your dog is reluctant to do that, you can try that. Again, I'm just going to let her move my fist a little bit. And I'm not trying to pull her out of the sit, yes, but just enough so she's enticed to use her foot to stabilize my hand. Great. We're going to practice this just a few times. If you have your dog, feel free to practice it with your pup. Again, I'm holding that food lure directly in front of their chest. Yes. And when she puts her paw, in this case, it's on my arm, which is close enough for me, so I'm going to reward that behavior, and I can fine-tune it a little more over time. Yes. Maybe I should teach her to shake with the other paw. She doesn't know that one. Maybe I'll wait her out, see if she'll. Yes. So I'm marking and rewarding when she picks up her other paw. She knows a lot of dogs, just like people, are right or left-handed or right or left pawed. So if your dog is prone to just putting one, or you want to teach them, the term or the cue other paw, you can teach them this way by just ignoring the other paw on your arm or your hand and wait for them to lift that opposite foot. I'm just going to ignore her. She's taking my hair tie off. Yes. So she picked her foot up just a little bit, so I'm going to mark and reward it. I'm not sure if you can see that, so I'm going to put my camera down just a little. And again, I'm working on, whoop, that scare you? You're on. I'm working on this side here for Volta. Yes. So she picked up that front paw a little bit. Yes. If you notice, she just raised it a little more, and I'm rewarding all of these little efforts towards the end result. I don't need her to immediately put her paw up there. I don't want her to get frustrated. I want to keep her with me and keep her training. Yes. She picked it up even farther that time. Yes. Picked it halfway up. She picked it up a little, but I'm going to wait her out. Giving me the other paw, and I'm just ignoring it. Yes. Oh, she put it almost all the way up on that one. ignoring the other paw. Yes, good girl. Nicely done. I'm gonna give her 2 treats for that. She's doing it quick. Right in front of her chest. Yes, good girl. Nice. So you kind of get to see her walk through the steps there with that opposite paw. Again, just little incremental bits. Now, when you want to add the verbal cue, like paw or shake, again, you're going to want to start by fading the lure like we did with the other 2 exercises. So getting rid of the treat and then pulling the treat out when the dog performs the behavior. So I'm going to do the exact same hand motion without the treat in my fist. Then I'm going to mark and then get the treat and feed it to her. And you shouldn't get rid of this lure in the hand step until your dog is succeeding 9 times out of 10 or really consistently pawing your hand. I'm just going to ignore the other paw. Yes. So she didn't give me the finished result because this is new for her, but I didn't have the treat in my hand that time. I saw her lift her front paw up a little bit, so I marked and then I fed the treat. Oh, and again, I don't need a lure. My hands are empty. She's confused. She says, this has worked so much before, and now it's not working on that side, huh? Yes. Good girl. And again, short sessions are best. You don't want your dog to get burnt out on this exercise. You want it to be fun and novel and keep them stimulated. Awesome. So after I faded the lure, I'm going to add that verbal cue, whether that's paw or shake. The dog is sitting. I'm going to say, I guess shake because that one is paw. So shake. Well, that was a big burp. Touch. And I'm done with this trick. And that's all right. If she doesn't want to continue with this trick, if she's kind of getting burnt out, and your dog might too, don't push it. Take a breath, work on a different trick, and then just come back to that trick at another time. It's okay. Some days we don't all want to do math problems. Maybe we want to study history instead, and that's all right. Great. So if your dog already knows shake and you want to turn it into high five, kind of a bonus skill. We're running a little long, but I really love high five. It's near and dear to my heart. If your dog is already doing shake, yes. With that hand presentation, you can begin turning your hand a little bit to the side. Again, I'm not going to go straight upright. But I'm still going to prompt my dog to shake by either the verbal cue if she forgets, but my hand is just tilted a little way. So just like all of these skills, incremental is best. I'm not going to immediately put my hand upright. I'm going to put it to the side and down. Yes. So again, my hand is to the side. Yes. And over time, as your dog is succeeding, you can begin putting, yes, your hand more and more upright, kind of like a clock. Yes, until your dog is putting their paw up on your upright hand. And same thing, you can add the verbal cue when your dog is successfully and pretty consistently putting their paw on your hand. Say high five, or at Volta knows high 10. High five. Yes, that was more of a high 10, but I will take it. Yes. And for a lot of dogs, you may not need a verbal cue, right? They're already getting this visual cue, your hand either down or upright. So if you don't want to add a verbal, don't worry about it. Most dogs are going to know when they see your hand upright and you're kneeling down that means to put their paw on your palm. Awesome. So we're just about out of time. I so appreciate you guys joining us for these really fun tricks. And again, we're always here to answer any questions that you may have. I'm just going to bring up our little end card with our contact information. I also want to plug our puppy behavior spotlight. So Tiff is an absolute rock star. And she's been doing really amazing puppy spotlights with her little lady Paya on a variety of topics. So nipping and biting, separation training, anything that you want your new puppy to know, because she's doing it with her puppy right now. And those are Wednesdays at 6 p.m. If you've missed them, if you want to reference any of the old ones like jumping up or nipping and biting, we will be adding those to YouTube here in the near future. We're working on that, so stay tuned. But you can also scroll through our Facebook and those are available to you as well. And we're going to continue to offer these free behavior spotlights and puppy spotlights Wednesdays and Thursdays at 6 p.m. Let's see if I can get our information up. Great, so hopefully you can see that. Thanks again so much for tuning in. As always, we are a privately funded nonprofit organization, and any amount that you can give provides for the continuation of these programs and for the care of our shelter pets. Like one of my favorite pups in our care right now, Olaf. Olaf is a roughly 3-year-old little happy boy who loves toys and would love to go home to a mature family with no other dogs, but he would love to snuggle. He loves suckling on his little teddy bear that some volunteer had gifted to the shelter. He could play tug all day, but he also settles really beautifully in your home. So if you're looking to add a dog, Olaf could be your man. Feel free to reference our website, check out the pets that we have available, and then fill out a Pet and People profile. We'd love to hear from you. Again, if you have any questions, behavior@myhswm.org. We're happy to answer them, puppy, trick related, or otherwise. Just be in touch, or you can call us at our free behavior helpline or our mainline shelter number and ask for one of the trainers on staff. We're happy to be here for you. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your evening, and hopefully we'll see you next Wednesday at 6.